Okay, let's talk about some profits. Okay, profits or losses. So there is a set of steps we go through, a serious set of steps for finding a profit or loss. On this section, they are going to start you off with a one that's a little more easy. It says young Roxy invested a backloading. So this is very important. Front loading and backloading is very important. A backloading mutual fund at 3%. The net asset value at his time of purchase was $16.24. At the time he sold his fund, the asset was $16.01. His investment was $8,350. How many shares did he buy? Okay, so remember we have that formula for the number of shares purchased. It's the amount you invested minus your loading charge divided by the net assessment value per share. And this is at the time you're purchasing it. But notice this was a backloaded one, so the loading charge at purchase is going to be 0 because it was backloaded. Or if it's a type B fund, it's backloaded. So your loading charge in this case, those cases would be 0. So really we're taking the amount he invested, $8,350, dividing by the net asset per share. Now notice they gave us two, one at the time of purchase and one at the time of sale. We want to use the one at the time of purchase because we want to know how many we purchased. Okay, so again, our amount invested is $8,350. It's a backloading, so we don't have to pay a loading charge up front. So we just divide that by $16.24. And when we do, we get $514, or excuse me, 514.16. And again, it will just depend on what they're looking at, on how they want you to round that off. If it comes out even, just leave it even. So he bought about 514 shares. All right, now here comes the biggie. Here we are doing a full investment problem and finding the profit or loss. Here are all of our formulas. Your profit or loss is calculated taking the net selling price minus the investment. But then we would have to know the net selling price. So then we have our formula for net selling price. It's the number of shares times the selling price per share minus the loading charge when you're selling it. Okay, but then we need another formula down here because we have to calculate the number of shares. That's the amount invested minus the loading charge and divided by the net asset value per share. And then down here, to know the loading charge, we have to have the loading charge formula. So I'm going to start at the top, work my way down, and then we'll work our way back up to the top, filling in the parts that we're missing from each formula. Okay, are we ready? So here's Maya Frank. She invested $134,000 in a mutual fund type B. Now type B is very important. That means it's backloaded. So you pay the loading charge at the end, not at the beginning. The net investment at the time of purchase was $18.32 and was backloaded with a rate of 3.9%. When Maya sold her fund shares, the net asset value was $20.70. Considering the back-end load, how much profit or loss did Maya make on her investment? So to find profit or loss, we take the net selling price minus the amount of the investment. We know the amount of the investment, it was $134,000, but we don't know the net selling price yet. We'll come back to that. So how would we calculate the net selling price? Well, it's the number of shares, which we don't know yet, times, okay, so we're missing a spot here, times our selling price per share. We do know that it was given to us at the time of sale. The selling price per share was $20.70 minus the loading charge, which also we don't know yet. Okay, so I'm just going to leave these blanks and we'll come back up and fill them in as we find them out. I drop down here. So to fill this out, I have to know the number of shares and the loading charge. So let's find the number of shares. Okay, the number of shares purchased, so this is at the time of purchase, is the amount invested. That was $134,000 minus the loading charge. Well, at the time of purchase, the loading charge is 0 because this is a backloaded fund. Okay, it's type B. So there's no loading charge when you're purchasing. Divided by the net asset value per share. This is the net asset value at the time of purchase. Again, because you're purchasing shares, you want your loading charge and your asset value to come from the time of purchase. So that's why we're using the 1832 here. Here we used the $20.70 because that was at the time we were selling it. All right, so what do we have here? We almost have our number of shares. It's 134,000 divided by $18.32. Okay, when I do that, I get about $7,314.40. So there's my number of shares purchased. I'm going to go back up here and fill that in my formula up here. And that's the only place it goes for now. Now let's find our loading charge. The loading charge is the loading rate, which is pretty easy to find, 3.9%. Move the decimal 2 places to the left. So our loading rate is 0.039 times the amount invested or the amount of the sale. Okay, so since this is an end loaded or back loaded, we want the amount of sale, which is going to be the number of shares, which we just found was $7,314.40. Okay, so that's how many shares we are selling. And the price at that time, because we want to know the value, okay, the amount of the sale. And again, so we sold 7,314 shares, okay, and the price at the time we sold it was $20.70. Okay, that's the price at the time of sale. So we take our loading rate times the amount, the number of shares we have, times the price at sale time, and that's because this is backloaded again. Okay, so let's calculate that. Just multiply them straight across. So 0.039 times 7,314.4 times 20.7. Okay, when I do that, I get $5,904.92 is my loading charge. Okay, so now we go back up. Where did we need to fill in loading charge? Right here we had a blank that was supposed to be our loading charge at the end. Okay, if this were front loaded, we wouldn't have a loading charge here. We would have paid at the beginning. All right, let's go ahead and calculate that. So do our order of operations. So multiply first. So we do 7,314.4 times 20.7. That gives us $151,408.08. We're going to subtract the loading charge, which was $5,904.92. And we go ahead and do that. So take 151,408.08 minus 5,904.92. And when I do, I get $145,503.16. And again, that was our net selling price. So that's what the stock was sold for. Now we can find out what our profit or loss was. This is what we sold it for. Originally we invested this much. So we come back up here, our selling price was $145,503.16. Subtract from that the amount we invested. If it's positive, we made a profit. If it's negative, we had a loss. And it is positive. It's a positive $11,503.16. Okay, so we had a profit of $11,503.16. So you can see there's quite a process to this, but if you go one step at a time, it's doable. I would make sure I took notes as I went through this. Okay, we have one more of those to practice up on. It's our young Raxy. Okay, so he again is using a backloading mutual fund, which means he pays the loading charge at the end when he sells. His rate is 3%. The net asset value when he buys is $624. When he sells, it's $1601. He invested $8,350. We want to know how much profit or loss. And again, this is back-end loaded. Okay, well, our profit or loss is going to be the net selling price, which we don't know right now, minus the investment. We do know the investment. He invested $8,350. Okay, let's go down a step. We're going to fill these things in as we find them. We need to find the net selling price so we can find the profit. So we take the number of shares, which we don't know yet, times the selling price per share. We do know that. At the time he sells, the selling price per share is $16.01. Minus the loading charge. Now, if this were front end, the loading charge would be 0, but it's back end, so at the time of sale, he has to pay that loading charge, which we haven't calculated yet, thus the blank spot that I left. Now, we need to fill in our blanks, so we need to find the number of shares and the loading charge. The number of shares, you take the amount you invested, which in this case was $8,350, minus the loading charge at the beginning, which is nothing, because again, this is a back-end load. And you divide it by the net asset value per share at the time of purchase, because this is the amount purchased, and that was $16.24. So basically we're taking $8,350 divided by 1624, and we actually did this on the first question. You should get the same answer for the number of shares purchased. When I do that, I get 514.16, and I'm just going to round to 2 decimal places. Okay, so that's the number of shares purchased. So I can fill in this blank now. And that's all for now. Now I need to find the loading charge. Again, this is the time that he is selling. The loading rate was 3%. So if we move the decimal 2 places to the left, we get 0.03. Times the amount invested or sold. So the amount of the sale is what we're going with because we're selling it. That's when the loading charge is on a back end. Okay, so the amount of the sale. Well, it would be our number of shares, which was 514.16, we just found that, times the price per share when we're selling it. Now that would be $16.01. Again, that's because we're going with amount of sale here and not the amount we're investing, because it's a back end and we do it at the sale. Okay, let's go ahead and calculate that. So take 0.03 times 514.16 times 16.01. Okay, you should get $246.95. So that's our loading charge. So we can come back up here and where we had loading charge, fill in that value. Okay, now we can come back up and calculate our net selling price, and once we have that, we can put it in up here. We use order of operations, so take the 514.16 times 16.01 first. We do multiplication and subtraction, we do second. Okay, when we do that, we get $8,231.70 minus $246.95. That gives us our net selling price of $7,984.75. Okay, so now that we know our net selling price, we can go and we can put it in up here to find out what our net loss or profit was. So again, our net selling price we just found was $7,984.75. We go ahead and subtract. If we get a negative number, that means we had a loss. If it's positive, we had a profit. So 7984.75 minus 8,350 that he invested is a negative $365.25. So my answer is that I had a loss of $365.25.